welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Well, I am back on the cinema viewings. Of course, a few weeks ago I watched David Lynch's Dune. I then watched the documentary about Jodorowsky's Dune. And finally, I have now seen Denis Villeneuve's Dune. That's right, the 2021 long-anticipated, COVID-delayed, giant, all-star cast film has been released. Dune. I feel like I know more about Dune, considering I'm someone who I started the book, failed to read the book. I do feel like I've now fallen into some kind of Dune pit. Because, like I say, having seen all these different variations and done a little bit of reading around, I'm starting to get a really entrenched knowledge of the world of Arrakis and the universe as it exists in the franchise of Dune. So it's very hard to work out where to start with this, because of course this is the latest or and the huge, massively anticipated adaptation of Dune by Denis Villeneuve, not Ava DuVernay, as I mistakenly said during my David Lynch, which is Dune video, but here we are. It's, potentially the fully realised version, adaptation of the Frank Herbert novel Part 1, because of course Denis Villeneuve has decided to split this into two films, or the first book of Dune into two films. And I obviously am speaking from someone who, when I was watching David Lynch's Dune and when I was watching Jodorowsky's Dune, did start to fall in love with both those versions. Bearing in mind that Jodorowsky's doesn't even exist, but just the way he spoke about it and the way that he was planning to explore the universe of Dune, it created a landscape of imagination that possibly surpasses any actual realised version. The idea of it is greater than the actual whatever film would have been eventually produced. And I speak as someone who did love David Lynch's Dune, because I love the fact that David Lynch, it has David Lynch's strangeness to it. It really fits his style, and yes, it is his worst film in his own opinion, and it does grapple between the style of David Lynch, the storytelling mechanics of David Lynch, with the vision to make a Star Wars type franchise, and you can see the grappling mechanisms on screen. Whereas this is the the version that feels more cohesive, the Denis Villeneuve version. It feels like he is fully realising his vision of the novel, of Arrakis, of the world building of the characters, even though of course he's gambled on the fact that he has only made half the book. And to some degree, yes, this is the most realised version. You really get that sense of alien worlds, of a complex, shifting universe of politics and machinations and different factions constantly moving against each other. It really does build that Star Wars-esque saga. And again, it creates this quite entrenched sense of culture that when you go to Caladan and you see the world of Caladan and how Duke Leto runs things and sort of the way that his world operates compared to the Harkonnens and how their system operates on both the planet that they're based and on Arrakis. And you do feel that sense that each world has been thoroughly built, practically. That it's not, a CG landscape that could be anywhere. that each planet has its own, and each culture on every planet has its own distinct identity, and I think that shows the craftsmanship that goes into building these landscapes, and I think at its core that's really what Dune is supposed to be. It's supposed to be that gritty, grounded representation of worlds, and what 100,000 years time, what the the human race will look like when it's spanned across the stars. And of course, beyond that, when you look at the building of things like the ships and the gyropters and all the machine aspects, again, you can see the precise mechanisms of everything. You can see the fact that so much detail has been put into, building the look of the ships, the armor, the soldiers, the sand suits, everything it's a Tolkien-esque level of detail where every like as with J.R.R. Tolkien, you get that sense that every tree branch has been thought about. At the same way that you feel like Villeneuve has thought about every tiny detail of the worlds that he is building. And again, this cast is just phenomenal. I mean, this is the, as I've said about when it came to like 90s and selling casts, and the idea that you would look and say, oh, who's in this? And you would see this cast of just top tier actors. This is the modern equivalent of that. I mean, you've got Timothée Chalamet at the sort of top of his game. You've got Oscar Isaacs, you've got Rebecca Ferguson, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård. It is one of those casts that you just look at and you marvel at seeing the sort of cream of the crop of acting. And again, because it requires that level of prestige, it needs to be practically a period drama, a big epic, almost like monarchy style period drama that just so happens to be set in outer space with giant sandworms. And of course the sandworms, let me not forget the fact that the sandworms in this adaptation are just, as I say, every detail has been thought of, and even the biology of the sandworms and their look. You when they're on Arrakis, which frankly doesn't make up as much of the film as you would think. I mean, still a large portion of it, but it's not like the entirety of the film is set on Arrakis, and it's definitely, you only see the worms and the dunes of Dune during certain sections of the film. But I think the beauty of this is the fact that you get that sense of Arrakis is portrayed as a deadly place. That it's not just the Harkonnens who are a threat, it's not just the locals, and it's not just the Fremen. The actual environment itself is consumptive. That to live on Arrakis is to be in a constant state of danger, to the point where when you see the sandworms moving through the desert, it doesn't look like creatures swimming through sand. It looks like the very sand itself is moving. And so, of course, when it consumes freighters and people, you get that sense that it's not just that these sandworms are just eating whatever's sort of on the surface of the land. It's almost like the desert itself is consuming anything it deems a threat. And I think, as I say, that level of thought and consideration to visually representing Arrakis, I think it definitely outstrips the Lynch one. The Lynch, I really like the landscapes of the Lynch Dune, but I think it's, that to some degree it looks good in some respects, but it still is, it's still the worms look good for the 1980s, but they still look like worms, and the desert looks good, but it just, here, it doesn't feel like a desert, it feels like a planet. And I think that's definitely the craftsmanship. I suppose the thing I think is a shame about the Denis Villeneuve one is the fact that, and again, I shouldn't be making this a blow-for-blow comparison with the Lynch one, but it's difficult with intertextuality because I'm thinking about the book, the amount of the book that I've read, and I'm thinking about Jodorowsky's description of what the film he would have made, and I'm thinking about David Lynch, and I can't help but sort of draw comparisons of what exists already to what Villeneuve has done. And as I say, I am someone who does quite like the Lynch version. I like the weirdness. I like the fact that you have, giant, like, boxed up slug creatures talking to old men, and these strange moments where it's like, is this a dream or not? You get that weirdness with the Lynch one, where, of course, and this is in his wheelhouse, you get that sense of, like, is this the future or is this simply a dream, which is very much Lynch's, his modus operandi. Whereas because Villeneuve wants to create something more visceral, something that you could almost feel like you're running your hands through, it does mean that it loses the weirdness. And a lot of people will prefer that the weirdness of Dune should be toned down because you want to feel like you're watching a more strict narrative movie. And people like the grittiness of more hardline narratives. But to me, I just feel like, considering, and especially the direction that some of the later Dune novels go, Frank Herbert was obsessed with the psychedelic nature of narrative, and the idea that things aren't just literal. There is this metaphysical aspect to them, and it's to do with what's within the mind's eye as well as what's in reality. And I do think it is missing that you do get interesting, the dreams and the way the dreams are and the visions are interwoven with reality works really well in this version. But it does feel like it's missing that strangeness, that sense, that the mystical sense aspect of it. Because, ultimately people of course will say, well, it's very much like Star Wars, and I'm going to preach the same thing that everyone has been saying who's talked about this film, which is the reason that this version of Dune resembles Star Wars is because, of course, Star Wars was inspired by Dune, and it's the Ouroboros of, the intertextual nature of narrative, that thing influences thing, that sort of folds back and influences itself. But of course, Star Wars is not science fiction, it's science fantasy. Yes, there is, I'm splitting hairs, but it's not Star Trek, which tries to be a lot more, okay, this is what we think the future will look like, and if there were alien races, these are the practicalities of it. Star Wars is very much about, yes, there's the interplanetary stuff and the ships, but there's also the mystical side of it, the thing that the unknowns that still exist, and the mysticism that still exists within the universe, even beyond just one planet. And I think, and of course that is hugely inspired by Dune. And similarly, Dune needs to, the Villeneuve Dune needs to retain that sense of, because ultimately it is about, the nature of dream and prophecy, and are these things real, or are they simply people being driven by a combination of hallucination and ambition? But you need that seed of doubt in your mind where you think, is this a grand universal plan? Are we seeing the universe itself shift and mould to the intentions of these people, or are these people falling into a grand plan that is far beyond their understanding? And it, you want to feel like you're conflicting with these ideas. And again, the machination stuff is really good. You really get that sense, particularly with Rebecca Ferguson, with the sense that I significantly prefer her Lady Jessica to the Lynch version, because what I like about this film, and what it really captures from the original novel, is the fact that, of course, everyone has two faces. The way they present themselves to the world, and their inner face and what they actually think. And of course, with Frank Herbert's version, like with most novels, you get the inner voice, and the fact that something like a Game of Thrones or Dune, or you get that sense of characters needing to perform or present in a certain way, but as a reader we know they feel differently because we are inside their mind. And I think that is the body of Dune, is that constant shifting of characters needing to be something whilst thinking something very different. And I think that Villeneuve really captures that. You know, with Lady Jessica, you get the sense that she is playing this huge chess game, this four-dimensional chess game, where she's trying to manipulate or use the power of the Bene Gesserits to manipulate the people of both the Fremen, but also the other people of Arrakis. And of course, the whole thing of like creating or overlaying that sense of the mystical and prophetic, so that people will start to believe that Paul is actually a messianic figure without him needing to prove it in any way. And of course, you've got the fact that she is playing against the Bene Gesserit themselves, and then of course you've got the Harkonnens and the Atreides and the house chess matches, and the fact you've got Oscar Isaacs, who is demonstrably a good man, and you get that sense, particularly after the sandworm attack, where he's trying to save the men who were on that freighter. You get that sense that, oh, he isn't just being said he is a good man, he is it is being shown in the body of the narrative he is a good man. And so as the tragedy unfolds, you get that sense of perhaps this is not a world for good men. And I like that. I like, that's definitely something that appeals to me, that sense of machinations and trials, and it's very Game of Thrones, I suppose. And then of course you've got the villainy side of it. You've got like the Stellan Skarsgård as Duke Harkonnen, and man, that he absolutely captures the grotesque nature of Baron Harkonnen. Sorry, there's just something so, he's hard to look at. He's so grotesque, and if anything, that fits into the WTF aspect of the film, when he first comes out of the water and out of the smoke, and he's just horrifying to look at. I do think it's a shame that we don't get much time with him. We don't get much time with Dave Bautista's character, who's the nephew, the Sting character from the original. It does feel like a lot of laying of pieces in readiness for the second half. And thankfully, from where I am today, it has been confirmed that we are definitely getting Dune Part 2, because this film would live or die based on whether Part 2 was going to happen. And I definitely think that this is a good film in its own right, but it's an incomplete film. And I want to see, where this goes, and I want to see more of the Harkonnens. And of course we didn't even get anything with the Emperor or the Spice Guilds. And so I want to see all of these things sort of coming to the forefront, and we didn't, get more of the villains, whereas this is much more about setting the stage and the grounds. And of course you get, like I said, this is a huge cast. So you have, characters like Jason Momoa, who is great in this. Josh Brolin, who is really good in this. A little bit of Javier Bardem, and the tiniest amount of Zendaya, considering that the film, or the promotion for the film made it out like she was going to be there front and centre. Very little amount of Zendaya considering, but obviously this is all laying the ground for the sequel, and of course in the grand narrative of Dune, Chami is a very important character. And I'm so pleased this has worked out. I'm so pleased that this film, and this is definitely a cinema film. I understand that in America they've released it both to the cinema and streaming, but this is a film that needs to be seen on the biggest screen as possible, because it is about the scale of it, and like I say, the detail of it, and I think that's what Villeneuve has just mastered. I think, I've already said he is a great filmmaker, and I think this, between Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, he is a great filmmaker, and this, especially with science fiction, and I think this is just adding to that sense of he knows exactly what he's doing, and it is just perfect. And I'm really looking forward to part 2. Really am. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you liked this video, hit the like button, comment below and share the video because this will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.